All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, wherever you're at in the world. Welcome to today's webinar. It's going to be on the power of automation and best practices within HaloPSA. Quick intro of myself. I'm Tyler Miller. I'm the president and CEO here at TechPulse, and I'll be also acting as the host and moderator for today. Quick intro on TechPulse and our professional services division. So TechPulse is a US-based MSP. We've been around since 2009. And, in the last couple of years, we opened up our professional services division where we help other MSPs implement tooling like HaloPSA, as well as help them with just automation in general, efficiency, and other aspects of operating their business, such as custom scripting, procurement services, escalation, things like that. All right. Today, we're incredibly fortunate to have with us as well Christopher Scaminaci. He is our VP of Engineering at TechPulse, and he also leads our professional services division. So if you're a partner MSP of ours, you probably already know Chris. He's not only a leading expert on HaloPSA at TechPulse Professional Services, but he's also the person behind MSPautomator.com. That's a resource that has become pretty synonymous with cutting-edge MSP automation strategies. He posts a lot of things on there that are pretty neat, so I would recommend you check that out if you haven't heard of it. Chris has a rich background in developing solutions that enhance efficiency and service delivery. And he has helped redefine kind of what is possible in the realm of IT managed services, right? Beyond his professional credentials, Christopher is known for his hands-on approach and his ability to translate complex technical scenarios into clear, actionable strategies, right, in the back end. So whether you're here to explore the intricacies of HaloPSA automation, or just understand how something like middleware, right, can elevate your service offerings, you're in for a wealth of insight that can hopefully improve your business. Without further ado, let's get started and jump in. I'll give a quick explanation of HaloPSA and kind of how it impacts MSPs. I'm sure a lot of you here already use HaloPSA or know about it or use another PSA, but just in case, I'll kind of quickly go over it. Basically, HaloPSA is designed with the unique challenge of MSPs in mind, right? It offers a singular, all-encompassing platform that promises to consolidate different service management tools into one streamlined interface. The purpose of HaloPSA, and really in general, PSAs in general, right, to empower MSPs to kind of help them scale and integrate other systems that not only address the full scope of PSA requirements, but also enhance the quality and efficiency of service delivery to our clients. So I think the top impacts that we see in our own MSP and partner MSPs that we have helped are increased efficiency, improved customer satisfaction, scalability, and a big one for us has been better decision making from all the metrics. When configured properly, the KPIs and metrics you can report on to help make decisions in your business. A PSA in general is an investment, and I think if leveraged properly, it can actually help you optimize and grow your business. But Chris, I'll turn it over to you. Can you provide maybe some insights on kind of the role HaloPSA plays in automation?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And hello to all of our partner MSPs. It's nice to finally meet you guys all face to face. I would say, to answer your question, what is the role that HaloPSA plays in automation? I think that HaloPSA kind of changed the game for automation as far as our industry is concerned. Which is kind of ironic because there's a product out there that's called Autotask. But, what really changed the game in Halo is that Halo came to the table, with experience, maybe 20 years of experience of running their own MSP and in the past. And they kind of came to it knowing that they knew that they didn't know stuff, right? Like they didn't know what they didn't know. And they didn't build a closed platform with the intention of, bringing all of their integration development in-house and kind of just walling everybody else off from what they want to do in their platform. What HaloPSA did is they came to the market and said, we don't know what we don't know. So if we don't get it right, build it yourself. Here's all the tools you need. And that's, I think, one of the things that sets Halo apart as far as automation goes is that it's just so extensible, it's so customizable. And if there's things that we can't get to inside of the platform, there's things that we can do outside of the platform in middleware or runbooks that can basically bend HaloPSA to our will. And, Halo as an organization has been with us along that journey to make sure that the platform stays that way. And I think that's really the biggest thing.
Perfect. Yeah, I agree. All right. Do we want to delve into maybe some automation of tasks and processes in Halo?
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll cover a few things that are generally low-hanging fruit for most MSPs, right? Things that are our highest time burn, things that we make the most mistakes at, or things that might just inundate our desk with too much work to do. Specifically, things like that are onboarding and offboarding, both client onboarding and offboarding, and user onboarding and offboarding, but especially user onboarding and offboarding. Probably a good majority of MSP partners that we've engaged with in the past and that we've talked to outside of engagements are doing things in a very manual way, right? More like where we've got a checklist in IT Glue, or we've got a checklist, in our PSA that we're using now that we're following. We're doing all of these 20, 30, 40 different steps in a row to onboard a user and offboard a user. That's great. That works when you're a small MSP to an extent, right? But then you land your first whale client, somebody that's got maybe 2,000, 3,000 employees, and they're onboarding and offboarding maybe 20 to 40 people a week. All of a sudden, it became unsustainable overnight. So usually our user onboarding and offboarding is probably the lowest hanging fruit for MSPs as far as why would you want to go to a PSA like HaloPSA. And this is kind of where I made a name for myself initially in the HaloPSA community, was being the first person to do zero-touch automated onboarding, both for Active Directory on premises and for Azure AD users. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if Halo wasn't so extensible, right? So I think that, to answer the question directly, automation tasks and processes and how they play into HaloPSA and where they become important are, where do we get to that perfect point of, all right, we're going to automate our processes, but we're not going to take the user decision out of it where it needs to be, because the last thing you really want to do is over-automate your processes, because they either A, become unmaintainable, or B, they become rampant at some point and they run off and something breaks, and usually there's nothing you can do, right? I'll give a good example of that is for user onboarding specifically. You don't want to necessarily automate the license purchase step completely, right? Especially if you're, transition to NCE, which all of you should be done by now. You got till the end of December. If you haven't, you're going to be forced there. And the important thing there is, let's not get stuck holding the bag for a license that the client doesn't really need, right? If they've got X amount of users on a yearly commit for NCE, and there's 2 or 3 licenses that are sitting on disabled or deleted users that can be scavenged as part of the user onboarding process. Let's go scavenge that instead of buying another license, and then in a month when we offboard those other 3 shared mailbox accounts, now we got to go back to the client and explain why they're buying more licenses than users, and why we bought an additional one the month before when they had just fired 3 people. So things like putting check steps in where it matters at automation, and finding that happy balance of removing the time burn, removing the burden on the help desk and the engineers, at the same time doing it safely.
Perfect. I did want to mention too, I opened up the Q&A. Our goal here is to provide value to everyone here and to your business. So we want it to be interactive. We will have a kind of a dedicated Q&A session at the end that you can just ask whatever you'd like to Chris. But if you have any questions or comments about what he's discussing, I'll keep an eye on those, and we'll get those asked during the webinar.
Yeah, we'll do it Twitch stream style, guys. You guys can be chat. I know exactly which partners are going to be out there. They're furiously typing right now. But yeah, please let us know. Like, we're going to sit here and we're going to do the back and forth stuff, but stop us, jump in if you have questions or anything that's relevant, everything you want to hear. We want to make sure you guys get value out of this. We don't want to just be 2 talking heads that are talking, about our agenda here, or writing a love letter to HaloPSA or anything. Kind
of any other specifics you want to delve into about, automating workflows, maybe other specific workflows that we've automated or partner MSPs have automated, and then also maybe the balance between automation and manual intervention, right?
Sure. So like I said, user onboarding, client onboarding, and offboarding, those are your big low-hanging fruits as far as automations go. But you can think so far outside of the box with automation. There's so many cool things you can do. But I also see people make a lot of common mistakes as far as like going too far with it, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna, make my entire little tier one help desk, ChatGPT based bots. Not advisable at this point in time, right? Maybe in a few years, but there's got to be a happy balance, right? Like we talked about with NCE and making sure that you're not doing something you're going to be responsible to hold the bag for later, as a big thing. But you can think outside of the box and do some really cool stuff, like things like QA, QI processes internally, right? Like how many of you guys out there are actually pulling calls every month and reviewing a regular, selection of recordings, reviewing tickets regularly, not just to bill them, but to actually make sure that the interactions are quality and that, you're delivering the level of service that your clients expect. Those are two of the biggest time burn things, especially for small MSPs. Like if you're a small MSP, you're 5-6 people, you might not have, or whoever's acting as that SDM role they don't have time. They're also working on the help desk. They don't have time to go, spend 10 hours a week doing QA, QI on your recordings and your tickets and stuff. So using automation, and both AI and automation in that regard, is actually a really powerful tool and something we've built before and for partner MSPs, and something that we use internally. The ability to send call recordings, especially, right? You hang up your call from your PBX, whatever system you're using, it sends a CDR out to a runbook, and you are automatically transcribing that conversation, matching it to a ticket in HaloPSA. So not only have you done your QA QI step where you can do like diarization and sentiment analysis, trend word banks over calls for agents, pull things out that are like alert words, like if they, use a certain word or something that may not be considered polite. You want to know about those things, right? Flag those in real time, but also index the conversations in your help desk so that they're searchable, because a completely searchable interaction history, both on the telephone and in tickets, is probably 70% more data that you have to reference back to, if you need it, versus just recording whatever, trusting whatever the agent types into, the ticket is going to be the end all be all, and that's all the information you're going to have. Wouldn't it be much better if like they didn't do a good job of documenting what they did, and during the call it was very clear from what was said that we know how they fixed whatever that was, and now it's just searchable. So stuff like that. But like I said, you can't go too far with it. You can't pull people out of the process completely.
Yep. I have a question from Duncan. He said, with reference to user onboarding, how do you manage the balance between generic requirements for each customer and customers that have more specific or extensive requirements? Would you stick to a generic workflow for the vast majority of customers and then manually intervene, or would you attempt to build a customized process for each customer? Or is it a cost value proposition?
All of the above. That's a great question, by the way, Duncan. Thank you for that. I could talk about this for the entire hour. So if you'd asked me this question 2 years ago when I wrote the original MSP Automator articles about doing this, I would have said that you would have needed maybe even a custom ticket type per client, custom workflow per client, and it was too much work. You had to, basically build a script in each Azure tenant for your clients, and set the requirements of that script to build the client out correctly. Now, I would say that I'm much more experienced than I was 2 years ago, and looking back, it was a little bit of an amateurish approach, but it got the job done. And now I would say you use a generic workflow, a generic ticket type. Your new starter request ticket type that's built into Halo when you get it out of the box is where you start from. That's linked directly to the end user portal in Halo, so you can control the forms and fields, right? Because that's what ticket types do. Ticket types control the forms and fields that people see inside of HaloPSA. So you can also do custom fields and then do dynamic visibility for those fields, and that's how I do it. So we have one big ticket type with all of our new user requirements for all of our different clients on one ticket type. But depending on who you are, you're only going to see the ones that are appropriate for your client, right? So there might be 300 fields on that ticket type, but if I'm XYZ client, I'm only going to see the 20 that matter to me, right? And then, the intervention step for the most part is, like I said, the NCE, the license purchase. So we trigger an automation automatically when that new starter request comes in that goes out via the Graph API and looks inside of the tenant, tries to find users that are both disabled and deleted, but not purged, that have licenses assigned. And then, the agent determines, okay, I can go scavenge this license by maybe just purging this already deleted user, or I can just request a license. And if you request a license, it'll go, for approval to the SDMs. The SDMs will actually double check and verify that. And then if so, they'll approve it. And then at that point, you go out and buy the license with automation from PAX8 or whoever your CSP is. As far as like customizing the automation itself for your clients, that's where it becomes a cost value proposition, right? Because if it's a 5-user client and they do one onboarding or offboarding a year, is it worth it to do a complicated custom automation for them? Probably not, but they're also probably not the ones that need something like that. It's your big whale clients that they're doing a lot of turnover, and you've got to be able to do this exactly correctly every time, because automation is not just about saving time, it's about accuracy. This is what they do, they're schematic, right? If X, do Y is much less error prone than trusting your agents to go in and do a 40-step checklist every time. I've worked on the help desk. I never did all 40 steps. Sometimes you find shortcuts and your shortcuts work, and then something changes in the way that Microsoft or HaloPSA works, and it no longer works, and you don't realize. That's why checklists aren't reliable. But as far as cost value proposition, this would be something nowadays that I would build as one script. So it used to be a script per client, and we would, do all these different customized steps per client depending on what they need. And the answer to reducing that was twofold. One, it was just being smarter about using multi-tenant app registrations, the Graph API, secure application model, which shout out to Kelvin for CIPP and, being the one to teach us all how to do that in the automation community. But also about how much work am I going to put into it? So there's a cost value proposition to it, but nowadays it's a much easier ask than it was even really 2 years ago. And this is like a lot of people hate on GDAP, but GDAP made this possible, truthfully.
Cool deal. So you didn't do all 40 steps? Now you tell me?
Yeah. Don't go audit my ticket history from about 5 years ago.
All right. I want to move on. I do have 2 other questions that I had on my side, and I guess why don't you just pick one that you think would be more valuable? Like I would say, like any common mistakes, right? Automation mistakes specifically that you see MSPs make a lot, and how it can be avoided, or how does TechPulse approach the creation of automated workflows that we use?
Yes. So we have lived the lives of testing in production, and I no longer subject my staff to that as much as possible. We have a UAT instance, user acceptance testing, so I can actually blow that instance up all I want and not have to explain myself to the dispatchers or anything. And to this day, even while some of the partners here can attest, I'm doing a demo for you in my production instance, and you see that support coordinator grab that ticket right away, and then my Slack blows up that second. Hey, what are you doing? But how do we approach the creation of automated workflows? Everything starts with, actually, believe it or not technical competencies, but operational competencies, good management skills, right? It's about making sure that your agents feel empowered to do their jobs and to recommend changes where they may be necessary, right? I see this at a lot of MSPs where you've got the junior guys that come in, maybe they're level 1, level 2 help desk. They've only been in IT a couple of years, or maybe they're brand new, but maybe they're highly technically competent. And people will be like, well, we've always done it this way, and it's not your place to really try to alter our processes. That's the worst thing you can do. So the worst thing you can do is discourage people from actually speaking their minds, right? It's really important for us to make sure that our agents can come to me and be like, hey, Chris, this process is the worst thing ever, or this automation sucks. It's not, intuitive for us to use on the help desk. So then I'll go back and I'll iterate again. And I'll be like, all right, you know what? That's valid criticism. And no matter how much it hurts my ego, because I may think something is technically a masterpiece, in practice, as technical experts, we're usually not great at designing the user experience. So I would say that the most valuable way to start iterating through automated workflows and coming up with automated workflows is to just listen to your staff. Make sure that they know that they can come to you without fear of repercussions when they say, you know, this really is not good. This is burning a lot of time for us. And we feel like it would be easier if we did XYZ instead. And truthfully, I would say 90% of my approach to creating these automated workflows, and ultimately the ones that end up in our partner tenants and end up on my blog or end up in our videos on YouTube, are almost completely the idea of my engineers working on the help desk, which I'm eternally grateful for those guys and girls. They're excellent, just in every possible way, right? So I scratch their back, they scratch mine, and we make sure we get to the end result that works for everybody.
All right. I don't see any other questions right now, so we'll go ahead and move on. You want to talk a little bit about middleware solutions and their interaction with Halo?
Sure. So middleware is something that a lot of people may have a bad impression of, because when you're going to a PSA, especially one that touts to be able to do everything as far as everything you would need in an MSP. Maybe HaloPSA does make that promise, but I don't think they do. The worst thing you can say is third-party bolt-on, right? Like, why am I paying this much money for a PSA? Why am I paying this much money for a consultant if I have to bolt a third-party product into my PSA? Valid in some regards, but also we need to understand that HaloPSA is a worldwide product. The way that we run MSPs on this side of the pond is exceptionally different from the way that they run MSPs on that side of the pond, or in Europe, or in APAC, or in South America. And you got to think of it from Halo's perspective of, how do I build a product that can work for everybody without pissing everybody off? Or how do I piss the least amount of people off? And sometimes it's, the widest audience is going to win on the way that they implement a feature or a strategy. And the only answer for the rest of us is middleware, right? And middleware doesn't have to be software. It can be something as simple as a runbook. Azure runbooks, I think, are something that a lot of people in the MSP space kind of sleep on. They're serverless PowerShell scripts that can be run in the cloud. And they run in an Azure automation account. You can use managed identity with them so that they can participate in GDAP operations or other kind of privileged things, thinking like your onboarding and offboarding scripts. And they cost nothing. I think we have one that runs several thousand times a month, and it costs us like 32 cents. Because you're only paying for that several seconds that script is running, and you're triggering it via webhook, right? So middleware can be as simple as that, or middleware can be as complicated as things like BillingBot or OrderBot, which are, products. Obviously, BillingBot's in finishing up release candidate now. We're going to be going to official release in that definitely before the end of the year. And then, our OrderBot procurement platform's coming probably in Q1 at some point. Those are middleware solutions that I had to develop because the way that Halo handled those particular tasks is not valuable to us, right? And it had to be done. But I guess my point in all of that is middleware is whatever you need it to be. It's not hiring a software team to develop some custom piece of software that, syncs between whatever external system and whatever you need. It can just be a runbook. It can just be PowerShell. Even, Halo has got so many different ways to hook different kinds of external middleware in, and their API is actually so robust and easy to use that the sky is truthfully the limit. And I hope it stays that way.
Perfect. All right. So we won't stay on this topic long, but shameless plug, right? We did create some middleware, but it was out of our own frustration in our own MSP. Chris saw a huge operational issue we had with billing, and that's how BillingBot was born. And it was initially a tool inside TechPulse, right? And we started figuring out everyone else has the same issue, right? So can you talk a little bit about that and kind of how that has helped us and some of our partner MSPs already just in the beta stage, right? With those problems.
So, and by the way, BillingBot is not a for sale product yet, if ever, and it's available right now for our partners and for everybody else. But so BillingBot was actually born out of my stubbornness and refusal to allow Tyler and our operational person to bill the way that they were billing, right? It was taking the amount of, Pax8 stuff that we were selling every month, it was taking them like 3 to 7 days to just reconcile all the charges. And it wasn't sustainable. I mean, it wasn't sustainable back then. And so I kind of just wrote a quick little PowerShell desktop application. I called it TechPulse Invoice Bootstrapper. And the whole purpose of Bootstrapper was to actually read the Pax8 invoice and process it and manipulate it and transform the lines to the same kind of standard that we were using but doing manually, and then automatically push it onto the HaloPSA invoices. So the idea is there's several caveats to the way that CSPs bill. And I've actually had quite a few partners that didn't know that this is how the CSPs bill, and they were just billing the subscription amount every month and hoping they were getting it right. And it's something that no PSA really does awesome. And even HaloPSA doesn't do it very well, right? Because in HaloPSA, it's about counting subscriptions or counting licenses, which is fine if you just need to count. But you don't usually just need to count, right? You need to account for proratas, which can happen in the middle of the month. You need to, account for the way that the Microsoft billing cycle is actually offset from the Pax8 billing cycle. So weirdly enough, Microsoft considers every month to have 30 days in it for billing purposes, which doesn't add up to 365 days, I know, but there's some freebies stuck in there throughout the year. But if you take that into account, then Microsoft bills 30-day windows on a license, like an NCE license, right? And then Halo is actually just counting how many licenses it sees. So let's take like a 28-day February, for an example. At day 14, you add or subtract a license. So you add a license on day 14. There's 14 days left in the month. So Halo is going to say, okay, 28 days. I know that the cost of this SKU divided by 28 is X amount of dollars. And I'm going to apply that other 50% as a pro rata from the date the change occurred. Except no, that's not how it's going to work, because actually there's 30 days in that month as far as the billing cycle goes. And the way that it's going to shake out is it's going to be maybe $1 or, maybe a few cents off. Then you can add like another layer of nincompoopery to this. When you get to the end of a month, right, and you're in between that buffer window of when Pax8 bills, right? So the Pax8 bill comes out on the 5th of the month, and maybe I'm sending my invoice on the 1st of the month, or I added or subtracted a SKU on day, on the 31st of last month or on the 1st of this month, and you might not see that pro rata for 2 or 3 invoices sometimes. And that's just throwing out the fact that sometimes Pax8 sends you an invoice and realizes they screwed up and voids your invoice and then reissues you a new invoice, like 2 days later or 3 days later. And then suddenly you'll get to the end of the year. And if you're selling millions of dollars of, subscription SKUs a year, you get to the end of the year and you realize, oh, I've only been counting this whole time and I've probably left $100,000 on the table. That's kind of where it got to, right? Where we're like, oh, this is not, and like, how do you reconcile that Pax8 is billing backwards and forwards at the same time? Halo doesn't really understand that. Halo just knows, okay, I'm going to bill the subscriptions, and when I see a change in quantity, I'm going to generate a pro rata for the number of days remaining in the month. It doesn't work. There's other, situations like maybe you need to bill across clients. Maybe you've got one conglomerate client, you got to bill the, the satellite companies to that main client. Now you can do that in Halo, but that wasn't a thing you could do back then, which is part of the reason BillingBot was there. But just things like SentinelOne's another good example, right? That'll come in as a consumption-based SKU for your home tenant for Pax8, right? So when we get our invoice every month from Pax8, under the TechPulse account, there's maybe 40, 50 SKUs for SentinelOne's consumption charges. Maybe you're an MSP that needs to bill for that kind of stuff, and it's not included in your stack. How do you do that, right? Because there's no way to tell Halo to differentiate between all of the different line items. It's just looking at quantities and SKU. So there's a lot of things that we're doing in BillingBot to make that process easier, where we're actually processing the invoice itself. And the last thing I'll mention is Azure arrears charges, which is probably one of the hardest things to bill as an MSP. Because if you're getting that, it doesn't really matter who your CSP is. It doesn't matter if it's PaxAid, Ingram, TD Synnex, SureWeb, whoever you're using, you're going to get for that Azure subscription from your CSP 10,000 lines. Right. And it's going to be every microservice, arrears and forwards that you use that month. And there's no way to not go crazy and go cross-eyed looking at that grid. And I would say the way that 99% of MSPs bill that is they just take the whole group and collapse it down right into one line. Add up all the quantities. Here's all my charges and my costs on all of these things, and give them one line Azure. So that was actually one of the bigger things that BillingBot was originally intended to help with. Was we were selling so much Azure and our PaxAid invoices were 20 or 30,000 lines a month. There's no way a person can reconcile that. So,
yeah, I'll say as a CEO that works with our VP of operations on billing, right, and accounting, just between HaloPSA natively, right, and some middleware magic, I mean, it's huge quality of life improvement. So
massive.
Sarah had a question. Where is the best place to start when learning HaloPSA and what it's capable of?
Sure. So I would say that there is tons of community resources for HaloPSA. There's actually a super awesome community around HaloPSA because I think it attracts a lot of the technical and engineering types like me, and a lot of the operational types and owners, people like Tyler who are interested in improving workflows, processes, profitability, things like that, because it's not a closed platform per se, right? It might be closed source, but it's so well extensible and everything like that. It attracts a lot of people that want a modern solution. You've also got the fact that ConnectWise is owned by the Borg and Autotask is owned by the Sith, and Halo is the only one that has promised to not be bought by the Borg or the Sith for the next 10 years, right? So we're seeing a massive influx of people into the HaloPSA community, and everybody's coming with the right attitude and with the desire to make their lives easier. So I would say the best place to start when learning HaloPSA and what it's capable of is check out the HaloPSA subreddit. Check out the HaloPSA unofficial Discord, which you can find from the HaloPSA unofficial subreddit. There's a whole bunch of other like MSP Geek and all those other communities. There's tons of content on YouTube by not just us, but by a lot of the other onboarding partners, third-party onboarding partners. And I think that there's no wrong way to build Halo, right? There's no silver bullet. This is the only way that HaloPSA works. What's so great about HaloPSA is that there's always more than one way to skin a cat. So it's important to see how everybody builds and see what's possible and get involved in the community. And from there, design your own strategy. What's going to work best for your MSP, and kind of just pieces and bits from other creators and stitch together your own fabric.
Will do. Jeremy had a question. Aside from PaxAid, would BillingBot work with other CSPs like Ingram?
Yep, coming. It's on the roadmap. The code's written. So it's going to be Ingram Cloud, TD Synnex Cloud, the D&H Cloud Marketplace. We've also got D&H hardware invoicing, Ingram Micro hardware invoicing, TD Synnex hardware invoicing, Twilio billing, and Ignite. Hopefully Ignite. I can't commit to Ignite yet, but it's looking that way. All that stuff is going to be supported by BillingBot in the very near future, like within a few months for sure.
All right. Let's see. So let's move on and get into some of the fun real world automation, right? Can you show us a few real world applications of that automation?
Sure. Let me pull that up here. And just because I know there's some people from that saw me build it. Yes, it's the same presentation, but I'm only using a few slides. Don't hold it against me. So actually, I gave this talk at Build It about like a month and a half ago, right? I was there speaking on behalf of HaloPSA, doing the automation versus AI. breakout session. And I really hate going to breakout sessions at conferences. Tyler will attest. He hates having to sit next to me at all of these conferences and just hear me scoff and go at everything that they say that's ridiculous. And so I set out to not be that guy. And I wanted to do a fun, like, case study based approach, right? Like, let's talk about some things that people actually care about, not how are you, how can I sell you my product in a very roundabout and not direct way. So I think the first thing that we talked about was like onboarding automation, right? So this is a good case study from one of our partners, MSPA. They've got client A. It's constant revolving door, 1,200 employees, right? So this is what we were talking about earlier with onboarding, offboarding. You're always going to get this whale eventually, right? If you grow enough, and they're spending 30 to 60 minutes per engineer time. Per onboarding per engineer for about 20 to 40 requests a week. So that is essentially an entire full-time employee just doing onboardings and offboardings. And that person probably hates their life. But they consider hiring a dedicated engineer or maybe an additional resource to help ease the load from on the help desk. And they determine maybe we don't actually need to hire more people. Maybe we just need a PSA. Maybe now is the time that we need to implement a PSA because we're using Zendesk or we're using Freshservice, or this is starting to get very specific, Tyler. But they don't know how to, actually implement an onboarding automation. So like, okay, we've got this PSA, but we're just clicking around, 20 times and we're not actually doing anything with it. And our result was, let's develop an onboarding automation, and it's going to be triggered by the new starter request in the HaloPSA client portal. And you might be asking, okay, well, how do we get them to use the onboarding portal? Well, the way you get them to use the onboarding portal or the user portal is you start with just your points of contact, and you say, we will not accept onboarding requests via phone or email. If you send them that way, they will not be actioned. You have to use our portal. It's single sign-on. You don't have to remember using a password. It's just authorized for those people that need to do those operations. That's where you start. And then eventually you're going to see that bleed into more and more people in the organization, because as those people are the ones that are typically onboarding those people to the organization when they start their first day, guess what they're going to tell them? Oh yeah, if you need TechPulse, go to this portal and put your ticket in. And that's how you get a lot of good portal engagement. But that's how you start, right? And so we say, okay, you got to use the portal to put your onboarding request in. They're going to fill out those forms and fields that are the only ones that are applicable to you, right? And you're going to start a webhook. That webhook's going to go to Azure Runbook. It's going to execute PowerShell in the cloud. It's going to create the username, the password, the temporary access pass, and it's going to assign licenses and everything too. And I guess when you asked me previously, what's a common pitfall that people make in automation? It's trying to assign licenses and scripts. Don't do it. It doesn't work. It'll never work. The way that you do it is you do everything group-based. And if you're not licensed for it, now's the time to get licensed for it. Business Premium or anything that includes Azure AD P1. You can do, dynamic groupings, but you don't even really need dynamic groupings as long as you have a security group in Azure AD and that license is assigned to that security group. All your script does is create the user in the format that they want, create the password in the format they want, create a temporary access pass and set it to, whatever their start date was that they put in their onboarding ticket, and you add them to a bunch of groups. That's it. And those groups are going to assign licenses. They're going to assign permissions. So to get to this point, though, you got to reconcile your own technical debt internally. You got to make sure things are group driven. You got to make sure that, things that need to be manually installed or whatever are either broken out from the process, or you find out a way to automate those too. It's not just, okay, I'm just going to create users and now I've automated my onboarding. It's much more complicated than that. But at least for this MSP, after we created those things, we push those back into the ticket for the technician and documentation purposes, and we send the temporary access pass and the password out to a password push link. So if you've never used password push, try that too. It's pwpush.com. It's free. He has an API for free. It lets you, push that password and give them a one-time use link. And then you send that via secure email via Graph. So the result of this was that a manual process that once comprised 162 screenshots in an IT glue document became something completely automated. One full-time employee worth of labor hours was freed up weekly, and MSP1 could breathe again. So that right there, that's lowest hanging fruit for probably 90% of MSPs that are interested in automation. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the QA QI one, I think, and we'll go on to procurement, because this is usually another one, right? QA QI is something that is important, but smaller shops might not be doing it because maybe it's just you and one other guy, and he's sitting across from you in the cubicle, and if he's talking smack. But so let's start. MSP number 3, they're doing $4 million a year in hardware, right? And they're having problems scaling this revenue stream to manual processes and errors. So procurement, if you're doing a lot of procurement now, procurement sucks. That is the worst thing you can do time burn wise, right? Because all of the platforms on the market right now that do procurement for MSPs are not awesome, except maybe 2, and one of them is owned by the Borg and one of them is owned by the Sith. ConnectWise is pretty okay, but you have to use ConnectWise to use it. And then Datto Commerce is also pretty okay, but now it's owned by Kaseya. So, they decided we're going to implement a procurement and ordering platform. They're going to supplement their PSA with that because this is, unfortunately still one thing that Halo doesn't do super awesome. Not that the quoting isn't good in Halo, it is. It's just the lack of real-time pricing and availability, and the lack of electronic ordering and tracking is not there. Which, if you're doing this much hardware a year, you have to have real-time pricing and availability. You can't be going out to the 3DSD websites and looking up SKUs and spending that much time, right? So the procurement platform, low-hanging fruit, right? It eases some stress, doesn't really solve any of those problems outright, though. Quoting, ordering, and invoicing are moderately easier, but the data is still living in 2 disparate systems. So you've got Datto Commerce on one hand, and you're doing your quoting, ordering, purchasing there, and that's going to your accounting platform. And then, your actual quote tickets or tracking of that process is happening in HaloPSA, and the 2 things don't talk really awesome, right? And I'll use Datto Commerce simply as an example here because this is kind of something that hits close to home for us too. But in a lot of the quoting integrations, there is no link between a sales order and the cost of items and the quote being sent out. So Datto Commerce is the best example of this. If you are importing your quotes from Datto Commerce into HaloPSA, you are not getting any useful data. It is useless. It's worse than useless. It's actually wrong data because all it's doing is pulling in the quotes. And if you use Datto Commerce, you know that the cost of the item and the landed cost of the item, if there's tax associated with it or if there's freight associated with it, is not going to come in because a quote does not contain that information in Datto Commerce. Only a sales order does. And the sales order can't be calculated, the value of it, until Datto Commerce does that distributor inventory check at the time of order. So if a quote gets accepted and it moves from quote to quote to sales order, when you approve that sales order goes to purchase order. That's when it's checking disty stock and pricing, and it's going to buy from the cheapest distributor that has the item in stock. Well, until that point, you don't actually know. So it's pretty impossible to do anything with that data, right? Because what good is knowing what maybe the cost of an item is versus actually knowing what my cost and landed costs were. So because of this, MSP number 3, they don't have a good complete view of their profitability from their PSA, right? We've got maybe all of our hardware stuff is going directly into the accounting platform, and then all of our managed services and everything else is living in Halo. So now your profitability and your other data is as good as useless. It's wrong, right? Because you're missing a massive component of it. And if you're selling, a decent amount of hardware, which you should be as an MSP, then you're throwing your numbers so far off that you can look at that profitability stuff in Halo overall, as much as you want. You're not going to really get the whole holistic picture. So the other big thing here is operationally, how do you reconcile tickets to orders? So, the help desk staff, A, needs to be able to see when they need something procured, what the status of that is. And B, you need to be able to track that stuff in your PSA, right? Because if you've got the airport, sorry. If you've got all of your orders, maybe so you 2 ways typically we see an order come in, right? Or a quote, rather. You got coming from the help desk. An engineer says, hey, I'm working on this thing, and this thing is broken and needs to be replaced. Or, hey, this laptop is 19 years old and held together with duct tape. We need to get this guy a new laptop. It's not even worth troubleshooting what's going on. So that's one way. right? They're going to come in from the help desk, maybe as child tickets. And then the other way is they're going to still come in from the help desk, but maybe they're going to come in from triage. They're going to be like just straight up, somebody emails in, hey, I need 5 laptops for new hires. Well, it shouldn't go through the engineer. It shouldn't be a service desk thing, but maybe those do need to get on site and they need to get physically installed, the monitors, the docking stations, whatever it may be. You got to have some way to pass that data back and forth so that the help desk service delivery team has the full holistic picture of what the sales team is doing, but not crossing too much data and not actually making them go out of their way to get that data or talk to each other to get that data, right? Because typically when you're doing this much hardware, your sales team and procurement team and your service delivery team are usually different people. Okay, so we get through that and now they just have different problems because all we're doing is, just creating things in 2 different systems, and we don't really have any correlation between the 2. And this is where the OrderBot product came to be. So we developed custom middleware. So it sits between HaloPSA and the third-party procurement platform, and it fills the gaps in the functionality between those 2 things. So this is specifically data commerce, and sales staff can then quote in the external system if they want. So you could go to data commerce, use that real-time pricing and availability, use all of that stuff that you want to do, real-time disty catalogs, pricing, all of that, and then all of that data is going to bleed back into HaloPSA so that A, the service delivery team knows what's going on and what the status of things are, but also B, you're going to be able to get anchor fields and good holistic views on your orders and stuff. They're going to be linked automatically. So that basically ties the system, the ticket in the system, and then HaloPSA to an order in an external system. And data commerce is an example here. This could work for really any procurement platform, and actually it'll be its own procurement platform here, hopefully in the future. But you're also getting things like tracking and status updates. They're being returned to HaloPSA automatically. So they're going to go back to the ticket. They're going to know as they move through the freight system. It's going to keep agents and end users abreast of progress in transit is basically the idea. But we're also doing things like, hey, we know that this has all been completely fulfilled, even if it shipped from 3 different places in 3 different pieces. Now that it's all fulfilled, let's close it and create the install request. The distributor APIs, they're integrated into that, so you can get information on orders and invoices in real time. And then the system uses machine learning, and then it detects when all items are fulfilled, closes the sales ticket out. So now we know how this order came to be. We know all the specifics behind it. We know how it moved through the system, and we know all of the details about everything that it resulted in, quote-wise, order-wise, and cost-wise. And now HaloPSA is, again, truthfully, a one source of truth for the MSP.
Sweet. Can you go in just a little bit more detail, like the measurable impacts that some of these case studies, right, had on the MSP's day-to-day by implementing these solutions and automations?
Yeah, massive, like huge, and and for anybody who hasn't picked up on it, MSP number 1 and MSP number 3 are TechPulse. These are case studies right out of the real life. Some of our best accomplishments, right? And user onboarding and offboarding, man, Tyler, remember what a nightmare that used to be? Like, it was actually probably the worst thing. You've never lived until you've gotten angry phone calls at all hours of the days from clients like, hey, I got somebody starting tomorrow and you guys are fuck ups, Yeah, massive. The amount of time burn that's reduced from that process is probably immeasurable at this point. I don't think that we could ever go back to doing it by hand, but also it helps you integrate, maybe if you're using outsourced third-party partners or whatever. Now you've made those processes much more accessible to them. The barrier to entry is much lower, right? Because it's not about, hey, learn all these 40 checklists from all my different clients. It's, hey, push this button and it does this. But on the other side of that, OrderBot, huge, right? Procurement is the worst thing ever. It's so time consuming, and it's not like it used to be 20 years ago where you could just email your Cynics rep and be like, hey, I need 14 laptops and 2 servers and all of this, make me a quote. It doesn't work like that anymore, right? In case you guys haven't realized, people don't want to work as like account reps at distributors because people like us call in and we're dicks to them all day, and like they don't have the technical it's like it's a different world now. They expect you to do your own quoting and know what know your own technology, because those technical competencies just kind of aren't there. I will say that though that probably Ingram does that the best, where they at least try, and they do have some good people on each of those hardware procurement teams. It's like still not you gain more by learning to do that process yourself and doing it quickly and efficiently than being dependent on whoever your rep is this week at Cinex.
Yeah, procurement specifically, right? It's so hard, right? Because it's a profit center in your business, and it makes sense to do it, and you can still make money while providing that value to your clients, and it's still cheaper than them going out and buying it direct from the manufacturer, right? Because you're buying in bulk. So that's really important to make it efficient. And I think by implementing a lot of these things, right, you're going to look like a hero to your team, right? Because you're making their lives easier. Yeah,
and exactly. And even if they're spending a little bit more with you, then it's cheaper than to go buy from the manufacturer direct. That's value that's worth it to most people, right? Like, most people would rather pay $10 or $15 extra for a laptop and get what you recommend, what you're comfortable supporting, and what you know is going to do the best, and they don't have to worry about it. Just pay it, when you bill them for it. But B, from the technical side, controlling the hardware burn at your clients and the hardware spread at your clients is one of the most important things you can do to gain operational freedom and like reduce time burn. How many of you out there are like burning time supporting Dell 5500s or, XPS 15s that like to try to burn places down? Like, it's terrible when you have to deal with old hardware and you're like, well, my clients are cheap, they're not going to replace hardware. Well, if they're that cheap, are you really making that much money off of them? Like, are they worth keeping? Because people that are willing to invest in technology are going to usually be the best clients that are going to spend the most anyway. And it doesn't always have to be, well, you need to replace this with a $2,000 laptop every time. There's deals out there, right?
Yeah, definitely. All right. So I want to open it up with like a Q&A session. You can ask us anything, really. Anything about Chris has talked about, the examples he's given, the concepts he's talked about, anything regarding HaloPSA, or just anything in general in the MSP world. We'll do our best to answer it. And if you want to talk, just raise your hand, and then I can unmute you as well. Will the recording be shared? I missed a portion of this. Can you guys share maybe a good entry starting point for someone looking to act on automation? So, Brandon, yes, the recording will be shared. Once it's ready, we'll email it out to everyone. And then Chris, I guess, can you answer the second part of that question? A good entry starting point for someone to look to implement automation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, oh yeah. So what's a good entry starting point for someone looking to act on automation? PowerShell. PowerShell's the answer. Don't try to get into automation. Don't try to use codeless solutions. There's a lot of platforms out there that shall remain nameless that will cost you lots of money and do little bits of automation. You gain a lot more from doing something like PowerShell. Send your guys to a PowerShell camp. Go watch all the John Saville PowerShell masterclass videos on YouTube. You're going to get the most bang for your buck finding the guy on your team or the guy or the girl on your team that has an interest in scripting and automation and wants to learn. And send them to a PowerShell class. Encourage them to do PowerShell. Encourage your staff to train up. Reward them for training up. Learning cloud technologies. I know that AWS is the naughty word. I would say that Azure is, bang for your buck, a far better solution for most MSPs, especially because we're already existing in that ecosystem. I see a lot of people that'll try to do Python in AWS and, maybe Python on Windows for automation. And just you're making it more hard than it needs to be, right? You're making it harder than it needs to be on yourself. PowerShell is a language developed for us by Microsoft, and Power is not a misnomer. That's the best place to start.
Cool deal. I know it's getting close. We have a few more questions. I think we'll stay to get all the questions answered, but if anybody has to jump, I just dropped in chat kind of where to find us and contact us if you want to get in touch. Again, this is our first webinar we're doing like this, so I hope everyone is enjoying it. We'll do more if we get good feedback, and if you have any ideas or topics you want us to cover, drop us a line. Let's see. Quentin said, "How did Chris get so amazing?" Quentin, how much did Chris pay you? That's what I want to know.
Not enough. How'd you get so amazing, Quentin?
All right. Alexander asks, where should software hardware assets management, the authoritative database of clients, users, and their software licensing hardware reside? In the PSA, documentation platform, or a separate CMBD?
There's no wrong answer here. It depends on what operationally you need. If I'm an MSSP and I only support maybe network hardware and flexible assets like that, maybe it makes sense to leave it in a CMBD, or maybe it makes sense to leave that kind of stuff in IT glue. But if you're your typical run-of-the-mill MSP and you want to synthesize and use that data in your day-to-day in HaloPSA, that makes sense too. It's whatever is going to be conducive to your workflow. And I hear the words best practices thrown around a lot. And the truth of the matter is that there is no best practice as far as a lot of things go in our industry. There's nothing wrong with having processes of your own if they're efficient and they work and they're, not time burns or error prone. I've seen a lot of, actually, since we started this, I was a believer in the best practices thing probably in January. And since we started working with partner MSPs, I've seen a lot of MSPs with really creative, homegrown, customized processes that are actually really cool. And I'm like, wow, I really wish I had thought of this back then because I would have stolen it. But it's, there's no real wrong way to do it. I would say that HaloPSA is a great place to start because you can synthesize all your assets in there. You can synthesize your software licensing and stuff like that.
No. Have you got any links, videos to some automations you've actually done, as in step-by-step type examples?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a bunch on mspautomator.com where there's step-by-step examples, tutorials for several that I've done. We've also got the TechPulse Professional Services Discord, where not just me, but some members of the other community join and share their stuff. And then we've got the TechPulse Pro Services YouTube channel, where there's quite a few, like automation and other kind of instructional videos on HaloPSA.
Perfect. So 2 more things that we have. What is the schedule for opening up the billing and procurement tools to the public?
BillingBot is available now. So that's, we can put a link there. It's beta.billingbot.app. And we'll be going in out of our last RC and into our production release here very, very soon by the end of the year. As far as the procurement tools, we're hoping for Q1 of 2024.
Another one was maybe a little off topic, but can you demonstrate a powerful AI integration in Halo?
I can talk about a powerful AI integration in Halo. This is something that's really cool now. Even in the last 6 months, the improvements Halo has made to the AI integration capabilities, which, by the way, if you guys aren't using generative AI, there's some great places to start. Things like we've done like an inbound tonality and sentiment analysis and like a quick summarization of all tickets that hit our desk. So something comes in, it gets immediately categorized. There's tonality, sentiment analysis, and a quick summary. I'm then taking the whole ticket itself and creating a vector of every ticket that's stored in a custom field in Halo so that I can use this data basically in the future to train a model, or I can use this data in the future to do some crazy like cognitive search things. But really what I'm trying to do is dial in things like getting that AI categorization exactly perfect, which we're getting close to. But some other, like cool AI automations. There's some on MSP Automator about QA/QI for, phone recordings, which we kind of talked about a little bit at the beginning too. And this is actually an Azure Cognitive thing, not even an OpenAI thing, not a ChatGPT thing. OpenAI does have their own like audio transcription model. It's called Whisper, but it doesn't do diarization, so it can't tell speakers apart. It's just voice to text kind of thing. Whereas Azure Cognitive Services can actually do diarization, can pick out individual speakers, and it can, pick out key phrases, trend phrases, all sorts of stuff like that, while it's also doing transcription, and it's an on-demand thing. And then you can push that data like back to HaloPSA as a child ticket and attach it. So that's a few really cool AI projects that we've done. And I got a lot of cool stuff cooking.
Yeah, let's see if there's anything else. I want to ask, what were the suggested PowerShell sources to learn from?
Yeah, sure. So I'll type that in. You're going to search a guy named John Savile's PowerShell Masterclass on YouTube. I recommend John Savile to everybody who works in the Microsoft ecosystem as an admin too, because not only is he the creator of the PowerShell Masterclass, which is, I think it's like 13 hours of videos, and you go through those 13 hours of videos, you're going to come out the other end a PowerShell expert easily. PowerShell is a very friendly, easy language to work with. But also John Savile works for Microsoft, and he is one of the the fathers of the Azure environment, really. He has helped give input and design Azure since its inception. He's one of the people that architected the initial Azure platform, and he does a video on every single technology, and he whiteboards it out. If you've sat through implementation sessions with me, the same way that I kind of whiteboard, I stole that from John Savile. He'll stand there and he'll explain things like you're five, and by 20, 30 minutes in, you're an expert in that technology, right? So he's every single thing that he makes is excellent. Can't recommend it enough. He's also got like dumps for all of the different Azure certs. So he's got like 5 or 6 videos for AZ305. You sit through those 5 or 6, it's the study cram. And he doesn't charge a dime for any of that stuff. Obviously, Microsoft's probably paying him handsomely. He's got like a $10,000 Microsoft Surface board. But
all right, Fernando asks, how do you measure the performance of the automation process? Like, how do you determine, okay, we got the best of it, or let's investigate some more on how to improve this flow?
That's a good question. So right now we're working on an integration for Benchmark 365, right? There's an API push from them to Halo, but the actual getting the ticket to them from Halo is a little bit more difficult. So they've got an API that we've been helping develop an integration for. And just when you think you've got it all dialed in, you're like, okay, I got it. This is a technical masterpiece. It surprises you. And for instance, it just happened yesterday. We've been using that automation for a couple of weeks now. And I started noticing tickets coming back without ticket IDs attached to them. I'm like, oh, something's broke. And you don't know what you don't know unless you're using things like Azure Monitor for when your runbooks fail, or somebody, when you're implementing automations, somebody is responsible for watching to make sure that they don't go off the rails, right? And once you get to the point of, okay, I've got all the bugs worked out, it's working perfectly, there's nothing I can do to make this more automated without necessarily impacting the safety of what it is I'm doing, then you put on the back burner and you work on the next thing. And you hold yourself to a strict review schedule of every minimum of 1 year. I go through and I'm looking at all my scripts to make sure that there hasn't been technical developments in Azure or in .NET or in PowerShell that I can use to optimize the script and make it better. So the short answer is you're never done, right? You're never like, okay, we got the best of it. You're like, okay, this is the best I can get it to for now. Let me come back and review it later and see if I can do better. And a lot of times I'll catch myself saying, okay, there's nothing I can do better. And then I'll come back a year and I'll be like, wow, I didn't know what I didn't know. And this other project that I had to do taught me this other subsystem of Azure that actually I should have been using all along. Now let me go back and update all my scripts. The deprecation of the Azure AD module and of Azure Run As accounts and the implementation of managed identity with that kind of stuff has forced me to go back and revisit a lot of my scripts and realize how much I didn't know back then.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions. Again, I'll drop in the chat kind of where to find us and contact us, the Discord link where we hang out, billing bot link, and our email. So cool deal. We'll wrap it up. Thank you everyone for joining. Again, this was one of our first webinars we're doing. If you like it, drop us an email, chat, whatever. Let us know you want more, and we'll definitely try to do more. Chris, thanks for taking time to share your insights and projects with us. And yeah, I think that's it. We will send the recording to everyone after the webinar. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone.
Thanks for coming.